Welcome everybody joining us today. Your anchor is Olga Temanova, working for the Ukraine Media Center. Today you have been invited to talk about an important issue. That is the result of the elections to the European Parliament, which took place just recently. And of course, Ukrainians have their expectations. We are talking to Maria Mezentseva, Deputy Head of the Committee on Ukraine's Integration into EU and the Head of the Ukrainian delegation at PACE. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome and glory to Ukraine. Glory to these heroes. We have seen the European elections, the media write about 370 million participating with more than 24 European members. These results are very important for Ukraine. We understand that the 720 European parliamentarians matter for the Ukrainian cause over the next course of their tenure. Let us assess the results. What can we say? What are the evaluations, if that is the proper word, through the prism, of course, through the Ukrainian perspective? Thank you for this opportunity. Now that I am in the field at the sidelines of the Berlin conference on the reconstruction, I have seen those who have been elected, have not been re-elected, or those who have scored a good result. The majority, shall I say, the majority of the seats that the European Christian Party, and I am the vice president of that grouping of the PACE and the Ukrainian delegation, we have been divided into different political factions. To be sure, we are trying to communicate to everybody. Now, my point is that I don't assess this election as very negative for Ukraine, or the election that we should be frustrated about, or we should be wary in one way or the other. We have to look into mathematics and analytics. The far right and far left, the new forces that belong to the far left or far right, they have not scored even a medium result. They don't have the majority. This is south of 100 seats out of 720 that you have mentioned, Oля. Of course, we retain the majority that backs Ukraine. With your permission, I will cite one example, a Belgian party, NPA. It is baptized a far-right, Flemish. It is focused on the national issues. I have just been saying hello to Ursula von der Leyen. Indeed, we had our representative at the European Parliament. He was very active in Ukraine. He visited Ukrainian front lines since 2015. Now that he has failed to be re-elected, he is trying to support those candidates that were running for their seats. That is to say, we should not focus on the ideologies of the parties that concentrate on their domestic policies. We should do our home assignment and continue communicating with our colleagues. I had a telephone call with a former Speaker of the Latvian Parliament, Mr. Edwards, and he informed me that they have a comfortable lead. They will have 9 seats in the new European Parliament, and they will be Ukrainian backers. And I will share with you, he mentioned that there are such radical people in terms of Ukrainian support, meaning that those who will be leaning towards Russia will not have good times. The colleagues from the PACE who were running for the European Parliament, my colleague, for example, from Croatia, from the PP party, ended up with good results, and he is elected to this European institution. Many colleagues, many parties, including liberal parties and conservative parties, have shown good results. For me, these have been unexpected results. There is nothing to cry about, nothing to be frustrated. We should be keeping work. Both President Zelensky and Chancellor Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that Ukraine, Moldova, and as well as Georgia, perhaps in the future Belarus, belong to Europe, because this month we will see the official negotiations opened, and Ukraine will take upon herself a number of commitments. The presidency of the Belgian kingdom is ending, followed by Hungary. I don't believe that there is a truth in saying that there have been some treason in place. We have seen more or less finalized list of the future members of the European Parliament. We should not forget about the fate of the European commissioners, that is, ministers of the EU. It's important to see whether Ursula von der Leyen will gain the majority. It's important to see whether she will be supported by the states to nominate those colleagues that they would like to see. The Minister for Enlargement, now represented by Mr. Verheyen from Hungary. It's important to see whether leadership shall be remained, and by the locomotive motor of EU, Russia, France, and Germany, or whether the focus will be shifted to Eastern Europe. What will be the response of the Balkan region? How will this EU election impact the domestic issues in France? Here in Germany, they don't expect the snap election. Chancellor Scholz informed that the next election will take place in 2025. But what we have seen in the local election running in parallel to the European Parliament election, of course, have influenced the number of the course of the left and right forces. We have seen the breakdown, this shift from left to right. We have seen those who have been re-elected. Mr. Galler, the EU deputy from Germany, a friend of Ukraine, he is now into his third re-election cycle. Let us remember about our own course. Hopefully that Ukrainians will be able to run for the European Parliament. A good news is that something of an extraordinary news when the blogger has become a EU parliamentarian. It's good that people from media, business personalities, the PhDs, academia, writers are part and parcel of this politics. You're not born a politician, you become one. Now that I have spent about 13 years at different European institutions, I can safely state that a lot of things depend on ourselves. We have seen a lot of interesting things in terms of resolutions, some blacklists, and the 14th package of sanctions, the use of 50 billion euros of Ukrainian aid, the way these reforms have been implemented. It's all upon us. We should look into the mirror rather than look at others and then communicate to the rest of the world our success. Now, when we look on the enlargement process from 6 member states to 27, that process has seen a lot of turbulences. The EU had to help itself, financial crisis, and the following depression. We will not delve into that. In spite of all the ads, and I'm quoting Ukrainian president, when he says everybody needs Europe, this project has brought reconstruction, peace, and well-being. The children, the relatives of the heads and leaders of the Russian aggression somehow happen to live in Western Europe, not in Siberia or in other places of the so-called under-federation of Russia. We know the risks and we will identify them, something we've been doing since 2013. Thank you, Maria, for highlighting main points about these elections. Perhaps I will ask you whether I understand it correctly, that the right forces have scored a success, but you don't see a endangering position to the Ukrainian cause. This is a normal process that we will be aware how to work with it, how to respond to it. Do I understand it correctly? Indeed, if we look at those who voted for the far right, these are the young people under 35 years of age. We should be working with them. That is to say, what we are seeing is that the social data tells us that young people don't vote, which also applies to Ukraine as well as to Europe and beyond. It all comes down to communicating politics. As we parliamentarians work here, how we engage the young generation into the decision-making process. It's a big question mark. How successful have we been? Because when Ukraine has secured a victory, we will see a free democratic election. We should be getting prepared for that. It's a lesson for us. I wouldn't say that this is a red flag, but this expertise should be taken on board. Ms. Mezentseva, I understand that we are on the next step of the Ukrainian accession to EU. If we could we enumerate the steps that are being taken in Parliament to bring closer this process, how speed up this process in general? We are expecting this summit to take place at the end of this month in Brussels. As we see it, our partners are in a hurry to finalize the negotiating framework. It has been backed on the reforms, and the 50 billion euro help and assistance is also tied to that. We are ready to start negotiations. We have been filling out the 9 volumes of the questionnaire as a candidate country, and Ukrainian Parliament voted on the 7 points. Last one was discussed a lot, including the issue of the rights of the national minorities. We've succeeded in our talks with the Hungarian government and the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. We've been communicating with them in terms of the draft bills going to the parliament. At the PACE, we are also working that in our Committee of Non-Discrimination and Equality. All the rest of the issues basically have been receiving a very good response at this Berlin Summit of Reconstruction. This is a non-reversible way. What matters here is the choice by the Ukrainian that has been enshrined in the Constitution, a choice that the Ukrainian heroes are defending at the front line. It is extremely important to defend such a choice of the Ukrainian people with the Iris-T, Patriot, and other anti-aircraft systems. Without such a defense, Euro integration in Ukraine will fail. Ukrainian initiatives are backed through the direct assistance through the peace facility, an unprecedented, a historical process that Europe hasn't seen before. Another important issue is the seizure of the Russian assets. Do we have something new here? Yes, there is good news. Both Ursula von der Leyen and Chancellor Scholz mentioned that we will be able to fund. The Ukrainians can now apply through the DEAR application. It has to do with the material and non-material damages. Now there is a conceptual thought backed by the G7 countries. President Zelensky mentioned that it will be on the table of discussion in Italy in terms of the interest that will be used, interest of the seized assets and the ways of providing crediting programs. The next Secretary General of the Council of Europe will be working on that. Now Ukrainians know that there will be election at the end of June will take place. One of the nominees is the sitting Minister of Justice of EU, that is to say European Commission for the Justice. He is suggesting and offering and propagating such a tool. We should not preach to the choir, and I'm quoting Ursula von der Leyen. She said that Russia must pay for all the war crimes and to pay both morally and by their freedom. This is Putin and his gang must respond and must be brought to justice through different arbitrations. We have heard a lot on this issue. This is one of the major issues of the G7 summit. And of course, Ms. Mezentseva, we can't but take advantage of the fact that you are in Berlin at the opening of the Ukraine reconstruction process. Do you have news? What is the makeup of the delegation? What are the messages coming from Berlin? There are a lot of guests here. I believe that in the whole we have about 3,000 persons, including other people at the sidelines, about 2,000 people there, armament producers, energy companies, state corporations, NGOs, human rights defenders, financiers, the companies representing the energy sector. A powerful conference has just kicked off, and the president announced that at the sideline of the conference there will be powerful agreements signed. And I like that Ursula von der Leyen devoted part of her speech, about 30 seconds. She talked about the hero city of Kyiv. She challenged the Ukrainian backers to provide more sense. Kharkiv has been bombed every day. Now that we have anti-aircraft systems there, the situation is a little bit lighter, but we all know that the genocide of Russia against the civilians, of the older people, the children, all the Ukrainians who are living in the Kharkiv region, a heroic region. We must work for the creation of the new coalition. We should look carefully who those people are, but it's important that the defense productions, they have been licensed to produce weapons through the new technology. They are working here on the sidelines. Ms. Mezentseva, we appreciate your joining us. We wish you success and all the delegation of Ukraine. If we could, we have a couple of questions from the floor. Welcome. My name is Shikrin Kumarenko from Ukrinform. My question is this. How can we assess, and in general, what are the colleagues from the People's Party in Europe, which we know is pro-Ukrainian, in terms of the impact of the new makeup of the EU Parliament on the Ukrainian chance of accession to the EU? Will there be new challenges on this track? As you have seen, it's about 1/7 out of all the European Parliament We are enjoying very good communication with that faction, including Ukrainians at the level of PACE and other institutions. We are all bound together through groups of friendship and other institutions. Once you see the disinformation and unpleasant parts of the resolutions, we are working on that, and believe me, the result will be better than we have seen before. It's about a decade that we have been cooperating, and this cooperation has been full of trust and result. Thank you, Maria, for joining us. Let me remind you that we've been talking to Maria Mezentseva. We wish you success on the sidelines of the conference. Thank you for joining Media Center. The next briefing will take place at 14:30. We'll be talking about fuel market in Ukraine. We'll be talking whether excess levels will be higher, what prices are to be expected. We'll be joined by Sergei Yurin, who is the expert in the fuel market. Glory to Ukraine. We'll continue our work.